All right, so good evening. My name is Ashley Bell, and I am an environmental quality specialist with Illinois Extension. And some of my areas of focus include waste management and air pollution. So, in today's webinar, we will be tying these two topics together and discussing how anaerobic digestion technology is used to turn organic waste materials into renewable energy while capturing that methane gas to reduce emissions from going into the atmosphere. So throughout today's webinar, we will have a few knowledge check questions. So my very first question for you is I would like to know, how familiar are you with anaerobic digestion technology? Never heard of it but don't know the details, you know the basics, understand it well, or expert level? Okay. All right, so let's see if I can turn the screen here. Before we actually jump into learning about how anaerobic digestion technology can be used to convert organic waste materials into renewable energy, I want us to first take a look at some terminology. So let's kind of first look at the word anaerobic first. So you can see that it contains the word aerobic, and aerobic means oxygen rich, whereas anaerobic, that means oxygen free or having an oxygen depleted environment. Now, microbial process, that means that these are tiny living organisms like bacteria or archaea, and they are involved in the digestion process. Therefore, we can say that anaerobic digestion, it's a microbial-based process in which we take organic materials such as manure, food waste, or crop residues, and they're broken down, they're decomposed in this oxygen-free environment to produce methane-enriched biogas that can be used as a renewable form of energy. So right here on this screen here, we have our anaerobic digester, and contains the oxygen-free environment here. So as we place organic waste materials into this digester, you have microbes that will break down that organic material to produce this methane-enriched biogas, which is captured to use. Now, I want to point out that the makeup, the chemical composition of biogas can vary depending upon the organic materials that you are digesting. But typically, the makeup of biogas is going to be primarily methane gas, in between about 30 to 40% carbon dioxide, and you may see trace amounts of other gases like hydrogen sulfide and ammonia, along with a very small percentage of water vapor. Now, if we kind of look at how biogas can be used, it can be used as a fuel for, say, heating, a fuel for a boiler or furnace. So that's biogas that can be used to heat a building or, say, water. And biogas can also be used for electricity generation. And that's electricity that can be used on site to, say, light your buildings or, say, cool milk at a dairy, or it can also be sold to the electric grid. And then you have biogas that can also be cleaned or what's called upgraded, where they remove that CO2, leaving only methane gas. And this is gas that can be sold either to the natural gas pipeline, or here in this example, they're compressing it into CNG that can be used as a vehicle fuel. All right, so anaerobic digestion, it does have multiple applications. It can be used at a much smaller scale, like a household digester. It can be used to divert food waste from being disposed of at the landfill, used at wastewater treatment plants, as well as it can be used to handle manures or crop residues at a livestock facility. So even though the design of an anaerobic digester may vary depending on what you're trying to digest, those same microbial processes that are responsible for producing that methane-enriched biogas will occur. All right, so let's take a closer look at some of these applications. So, in a developing country, you may find that there's a small scale anaerobic digester in someone's backyard. And within this vessel right here, they may digest, say, the manure from a few pigs that they have, a few cows, as well as any food scraps that they may have at their house. And this can produce them enough biogas to maybe prepare 1 or 2 meals each day. But I do want to point out that since biogas has a lower energy density in comparison to, say, natural gas, which is made up of primarily methane, you may notice that the orifice where the gas comes out of the stove is larger.
Okay.
And then moving to food waste, due to its high organic content, anaerobic digestion has also been used as a method to divert food waste from the landfill. And the US EPA, they estimate that more food reaches our US landfills than any other material. So this does contribute to a nearly a fourth of our municipal solid waste stream. However, we are seeing more and more states that are starting to ban food waste from entering into the landfill. So things like composting and energy recovery methods, such as anaerobic digestion that we're talking about today, they are being increasingly used to handle this food waste. So if we do divert food waste from going to the landfill, not only are we saving space in the landfill, but we are also decreasing methane emissions that would otherwise escape into the atmosphere by using this digestion technology. And anaerobic digestion has also been used at wastewater treatment plants to treat the sewage solids. And these are those solids that are left over after the wastewater treatment process. So actually what's pictured here, this is the Urbana and Champaign Sanitary District. This is their Northeast treatment plant. And so this particular facility has 4 anaerobic digesters, and they handle feedstocks such as sewage solids, fats, oils, and grease, as well as food waste. So they actually use their digester biogas to co-generate electricity and heat for their plant, and then a small amount of their biogas is burned using a gas flare. Now, instead of allowing methane gas to just escape into the atmosphere as livestock manures decompose in an open lagoon and it's contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, farmers have been encouraged to use anaerobic digestion technology to capture this methane and use it as a renewable form of energy. So these agricultural digesters often use manures such as dairy, poultry, swine, as well as crop residues as their digestion feedstocks. So I do want to point out that I spent my graduate studies at the University of Maryland College Park. And so I conducted digestion research at a USDA dairy farm. So I am most familiar with the dairy manure-based anaerobic digesters. So it's time for another knowledge check here. Let's see. Question number 2. Anaerobic digestion is a microbial process where organic materials are decomposed in an oxygen-rich environment to produce methane-enriched biogas. True or false? All right, the answer is false. It requires an oxygen-free environment. So, when you think about biogas production, you can see from this particular graph that there are multiple ways here that the biogas can be used. So we're going to focus on those manure-based anaerobic digestion systems. And you can see that the most common use of biogas is compressed natural gas. And that's that gas that can be sold as vehicle fuel, followed by combined heat and power and electricity generation. So when you talk about these combined heat and power projects, sometimes you'll hear people say CHP, and that's just where they're use the biogas to generate electricity, and then that excess heat that's produced from that electricity generation, that's what's used to heat buildings and say digesters on site. So I kind of want to talk about the science that actually goes into the anaerobic digestion process. So remember I said that we're working with, this is a microbial based process. So there's lots of different anaerobic microorganisms like bacteria and archaea, those methanogens that are involved in the process of turning that organic waste material into methane enriched biogas. So there are four major processes that occur in the anaerobic digester. So there is hydrolysis, the fermentation step, acetogenesis, and methanogenesis. So to kind of break down each of these steps for you in kind of a simplistic form, in this hydrolysis step, you have your complex organic matter like carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Those get broken down into simple soluble organic molecules. And then in the fermentation step, you have volatile fatty acids that get formed from these simple soluble molecules. And then in acetogenesis, you have those volatile fatty acids that are broken down into acetate, hydrogen, and carbon dioxide. And this is what's needed to create that methane enriched biogas. So remember, it's just a 4-step process to produce this methane enriched biogas. So I do want to point out to you that there are additional benefits of using anaerobic digestion technology that go beyond just producing renewable energy and capturing that methane to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So another product that actually comes from the digester is what's known as effluent. And this effluent is just the undigested solids and those liquids that come out of the digester. So post digestion, those solids as well as those liquids, they can be separated. And you can see how those liquids can be used as a fertilizer. So if you think about it, by using those liquids as a fertilizer, it actually reduces the need to actually have to purchase commercial fossil fuel based fertilizers. During the digestion process, nutrients become more readily available for plant uptake because those organic nutrients get converted to an inorganic form. And then those solids can be composted. And when they're composted, this can create a value added product. And this could potentially, generate a new revenue stream for a farmer because these solids, they can be sold as like a potting media for plants, sold as a soil amendment, or even reused as cow bedding, which is shown here. And I also want to point out that a properly operating digester also reduces odors that are associated with the handling of dairy manures, like liquid manures. And this can allow for, say, a home and a farm to coexist together. And it has been shown that due to these digesters operating at a high temperature, at elevated temperatures for like an extended period of time, there have been studies that have shown a reduction in pathogens like salmonella as well as E. coli. All right, so we're talking about biogas production. And I do want to point out that the amount of biogas that is produced is going to depend on the characteristics of those organic waste materials as well as the parameters that you're operating the digester at. So here what we're going to look at as some key factors for how we can maximize the amount of biogas that we produce. So looking at pH, so remember, this is a microbial based process. So pH is going to play a very important role. It is ideal for the digester pH to be maintained within the range of 6.5 to 8. And this range is actually optimal for those methane forming bacteria because they do like a circumneutral pH. Now, I really do, I want to point out to you that with the digestion of food waste, it can have its limitations. Sometimes with food, especially fruits and vegetables, if they have a high simple sugar content, those can break down so rapidly that you get an accumulation of volatile fatty acids in your digester, and that can cause the pH of your digester to actually drop. So when the pH of your digester drops, it can actually inhibit those methane forming bacteria from producing methane. So that's why oftentimes you'll see manure is often placed in an agricultural digester with food waste, because that manure helps to provide a good buffering capacity to help resist changes in the pH in the digester. And another factor that we should pay attention to is temperature. And so the rate in which biogas is produced is dependent on the digestion temperature. So digesters, they're operated typically in either the mesophilic or the thermophilic temperature range. And generally, the higher the temperature, the greater those microbial enzymatic activities. That means that those reactions are occurring faster. So that means the faster methane is being produced. So although you do get faster methane production in these thermophilic digesters, research has shown that these thermophilic bacteria, they are more sensitive to environmental changes. So these thermophilic systems aren't as stable as in comparison to a mesophilic digestion system. And then lastly, I want us to look at the feedstock, the biomass that we're actually putting into the digester. That should be taken into consideration. Because those organic feedstocks that are composed of simple carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids that can be broken down rather quickly, those are actually substrates that are ideal for anaerobic digestion. Whereas, say, feedstocks that have a high lignin or cellulose content, those tend to be more resistant to microbial breakdown. And so they may need additional pretreatment prior to placing in the anaerobic digester. All right, so we're going to move forward now, and we're going to talk about different designs of anaerobic digestion systems. So there are different designs that are found at livestock facilities. And shown here, these are the most commonly used digesters at an agricultural or livestock farm. And regardless, so those three are the covered lagoon digester, the plug flow digester, and the complete mix digester. So I do want to point out that regardless of the digester design that you may select, those same microbial processes that are responsible for biogas production, they still occur. So here we have a pie chart here. We're looking at anaerobic digesters operating in the US at livestock facilities. And you can see that the majority of those digesters that are operating are the covered lagoon, followed by the plug flow. So we're going to take some time now and talk about each of these digestion systems. So we're going to first look at the covered lagoon digester. It is considered the simplest design for anaerobic digestion. So this particular digester, this technology, it consists of a lagoon, and this lagoon here is sealed with a gas-tight flexible cover. And this cover here is what's actually capturing that biogas. You can see this cover here that's capturing that biogas. So oftentimes with these systems, these are designed using a pre-existing manure lagoon that was already on site. And these particular systems, they do operate at ambient temperatures. So that means that longer retention times are needed for the manure to actually digest, especially in colder climates. So these are more suitable for, say, a warmer climate. And how these digesters actually operate, you can see here our influent. We're pumping that manure into our lagoon. And as the biogas is generated, it's captured by this cover. And then we can remove the biogas with a biogas pipe. And so after those materials are digested, we can release it into another lagoon as the effluent. The next design I want us to look at is called the plug flow digester. So this is a horizontal, long and narrow vessel. It can be made of concrete or say steel, and it is covered with a flexible material to capture the biogas. So how this particular system operates, the plug flow digester is fed at a constant rate. And so daily you will add a plug of manure into the system. So during this treatment process, the wastewater is going to travel in plugs through the digester system as you add additional plugs of manure into the digester. So if I could give you, say, an example, let's say we designed this particular digester for a 25-day retention time. So that means at the end of 25 days, that first plug of manure that we put into the digester, on that 25th day, it's going to exit out of the digester as digested effluent. And I do want to point out that this is considered as a more simplified system because, as you can see here, it involves few mechanical parts. So I do also want to show you that long and narrow, these are flexible geomembrane or PVC bags. We can equip those with biogas pipes in order to construct these plug flow digesters. And these, what you see here, these are pictures. They're from a plug flow digester system that I actually assisted in building in Maryland at a USDA Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. And since we were in Maryland, we were in a colder climate. So these digester bags here were actually placed inside of culverts in order to provide some additional insulation. And additionally, these plug flow digesters were equipped with heating elements. And so it had a kettle as well as radiant piping. And so the kettle was used to actually heat up the influent manure to 28 degrees C before we actually introduced it into the plug flow digester. And then inside of these culverts here, they were actually lined with radiant piping, and the biogas bags were placed on top of this piping. And so this radiant piping actually circulated a heated glycol solution throughout the length of this digester here, and that helped to provide heat to the digester. Now, I also want to point out that sometimes in colder climates, you may see that these systems are built within the ground, but for ease of maintenance and operation for this research project, we decided to have our plug flow digesters inside of these culverts here. All right, so in comparison to that covered lagoon and the plug flow digester, complete mix digesters are usually associated with higher operating costs. And this is due to these digesters needing mechanical elements for heating as well as mixing purposes. So by mixing, this means that we are increasing the contact time of those microbes with our organic feedstocks. And it also means that we are minimizing those organic solids from actually settling down into the bottom of our digester by mixing. And so we can actually achieve mixing in several ways. Some digesters, they're equipped with, say, electric propellers or paddles, or you may see recirculating pumps to help with the mixing process. And then in regards to the heat, the heating elements, remember we talked about how anaerobic digestion is optimized when we have sustained temperatures of 35 degrees C. If we are to maintain that constant temperature within the digester, these digesters are insulated as well as equipped with heating elements such as a hot water piping, like you saw in a previous example, or there may be a heat exchanger. But I do want to point out to you that due to this heating as well as mixing, you typically have more biogas production is seen in this particular system. And typically these systems, they're designed with a cylindrical vessel, and that can be made of steel or concrete. In these particular digesters, they can be built above ground or, they can be partially buried. So, time for another knowledge check question here. The most commonly used manure-based digesters are the covered lagoon, plug flow, and complete mix. True or false? All right, great. The answer is true. All right, so shown here, these are some pictures of research pilot scale complete mix digesters that we designed for a field study at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. And so these digesters were constructed from 850-liter conical tanks. These are polyethylene tanks, and we equipped each of the digesters with silicone adhesive rubber heating blankets. And this was in order to maintain that 35-degree digestion temperature. But we noticed that during our research that we were losing heat. So we actually built these reflective foil frames here around each of these digesters to actually encapsulate the heat surrounding the digester. It also, we also wired the digester's temperature control panel so that we can continuously monitor and simultaneously control the digester's internal as well as the external temperature of the digester. So when that manure inside the digester dropped below 35 degrees Celsius, the heating blankets would turn back on. Now, for mixing, in order to minimize those solids from settling down into the bottom of our digester, we made these top mounted digester stirrers using these gear motors and these custom mounted, these were custom made steel stir rods here that we use for mixing. And since our digesters, they couldn't take much pressure, so we designed a separate biogas collection system using these 1,000-liter plastic bags that we install these custom-made gas collection ports on. And as you recall, I previously mentioned that biogas contained a small amount of water vapor. So in order to prevent excess water vapor from actually entering into these biogas bags, we designed these moisture traps as well as these desiccant traps to capture some of that water prior to the gas going into our biogas collection system. So shown here, this is our finished product. So how our research complete mix digesters operated, we would pump in the manure into the digester from this bottom port here, and the manure would fill up the digester. And on each of our digesters, we installed a water sampling port. And this port was used where we collected water to measure parameters such as pH or volatile fatty acids. And as that biogas produced, it exited the digester through this biogas collection port here. And so here is where we were able to collect our gas samples directly from the digester, so that we could measure how much methane was actually in our biogas. And then the biogas traveled through this tubing. It exited the digester, but before going into those biogas collection bags for storage and measurement, it actually flowed through this moisture trap as well as this desiccant trap to remove the water. So you can kind of see from this discoloration down here at the bottom that the desiccant is wet. So the desiccant is wet from that wet biogas flowing through it. So periodically we would have to change out this desiccant down here. All right, so moving along, we've now talked about parameters for optimizing biogas production. We've talked about the different designs of anaerobic digesters. So now I want us to look at the status of anaerobic digestion in the United States. So AgStar, they actually track the operational status of agricultural digesters in the US as they are voluntarily reported. So if you aren't familiar with the AgStar program, it's a collaborative effort that's between EPA as well as USDA. And so this program is actually encouraging the adoption of anaerobic digestion technology in order to reduce methane emissions that are associated with the livestock industry by capturing that generated biogas and using it as a renewable form of energy. So the data that you see here, this is looking at anaerobic digestion technology as of June of 2024. So there are, at that time, there were 400 anaerobic digesters that were operating on livestock farms, with the majority of those digesters using dairy manure as their feedstock. So you can see this red dot. The majority of digesters in the US are using dairy manure as their feedstock, followed by swine manure. And operation of these particular digesters has produced an equivalent of 3.29 million megawatt hours of energy. So if we take a closer look at the status of anaerobic digesters operating on livestock farms in the US, you can see that since 2020, we have seen growth, and there's been more growth in manure-based anaerobic digestion systems. And the renewable fuel standard, the low carbon fuel standards, as well as more states are implementing food waste bans, where food waste is being banned from actually going to the landfill. So this has contributed to the growth of anaerobic digestion technology. And I do want to point out that as of 2024, there were 6 digesters that were newly operated and 73 were under construction. And if we actually look at the potential of anaerobic digestion on US livestock farms, AgStar actually estimates that biogas projects, they are technically feasible. It's a technically feasible option for over 8,000 large dairy and hog operations in the US. So this means that it has an energy generating potential of about 16 million megawatt hours per year. And this equates to enough energy to power about 1,500 homes yearly. And in case you're wondering about what manure-based anaerobic digesters look like in Illinois, if we kind of go back to our previous slide here, in Illinois, we can see that around Freeport area, around Peoria, as well as near Galesburg, there are manure-based anaerobic digesters operating in the state of Illinois. So there are 3 manure-based digesters that have been reported to be operational in Illinois. All right, so let's move to another poll question here. Most digesters operating at U.S. livestock facilities use what type of manure? Beef, poultry, swine, or dairy? Great job. They are using dairy. Okay, so I do want to point out to you that biogas production from organic waste materials, it can vary greatly. So this chart here, it shows biogas production from different materials. So you can see from this particular chart here that manures, they have a much lower biogas yield in comparison to other feedstocks such as silage, food waste, or fats, oils, and greases. So I know you're probably thinking, well, a farmer may say they operate a smaller dairy facility. So can anaerobic digestion be a viable option for me? So I've actually conducted research. And through co-digestion, this means adding another organic feedstock to a dairy manure digester that can increase biogas yield. So this can be a possible solution for making anaerobic digestion technology viable for a small-scale livestock facility who were once limited by their animal waste capacity. So again, what I mean by co-digestion, that means adding another organic feedstock to that dairy manure to increase biogas yield. So I have conducted research looking at ways to increase biogas production of dairy manure-based digesters. And some of my research, it has been focused on investigating this forage radish cover crop as a renewable form of energy and using this cover crop as a co-feedstock to increase biogas production of a dairy manure-based anaerobic digester. So when I say co-feedstock, I mean that I'm adding this radish here, this radish cover crop, to the dairy manure digester. So I know you're probably thinking, okay, what led us to study this forage radish cover crop as a co-feedstock for our dairy digesters? So there had been an increased interest among farmers in growing forage radish as a winter cover crop because they wanted to achieve multiple soil and environmental benefits. Now, this forage radish here, it typically is planted immediately after the farmers would harvest the corn silage in mid-August. And so the cover crop, it doesn't compete with food production as most of the dairy farms had traditionally left their fields bare after they had harvested that corn silage. And this particular forage radish here, it is attractive to farmers because it's known to increase crop yield. It suppresses early spring weeds. Now, traditionally, this forage radish here, it would not be harvested because after several consecutive nights when the temperatures are below -6 degrees C, this radish here, this cover crop, is going to winter kill. And so this typically occurs in late December or January. And so as this cover crop rapidly decays, it leaves behind a clean and enhanced seed bed. So for our particular research, we thought, how about can we possibly obtain another benefit from this radish crop by harvesting the above ground biomass prior to this radish winter killing and using it as a co-feedstock in our dairy digester to increase biogas production? And through our research, we discovered, yes, we could. So yes, adding radish to the digester, to our manure-based digester, increased our biogas production. So to kind of give you some more information about our study, for our co-digestion feedstock, we harvested the above ground biomass. So this consisted of the entire shoot plus a small portion of the above ground root. So I want to point out, by harvesting only the above ground biomass, those benefits of increased topsoil fertility, soil compaction alleviation, as well as weed suppression, those still remained. As the below ground root was left in the field to decay in the soil. And these are some pictures of us harvesting the radish. And so first, the radish crop, we used a rotary mower where we first mowed with the rotary mower as close to ground level as practical. So this was about 3 to 5 centimeters from the soil surface. And then that windrowed radish material was forage chopped and it was blown into an adjacent wagon for collection. So from this particular harvest, we collected about 7,300 kilograms per acre of above ground biomass. And it is estimated that at least 55% of that whole plant, so I'm referring to that below ground root, that remained in the field for decomposition. And here, this is a picture. This shows you a closer look at how the radish looked after harvesting. And it should be noted that radish has a high sulfur content, and this should be taken into account because sulfur can have an inhibitory effect on methane production. Now, we're going to kind of go into just briefly some of the results from our study. So, in order to determine if co-digesting with radish could increase biogas yield, we conducted 2 independent field trials, and we used our research pilot scale complete mix digester for these experiments, and they operated in batch mode. So what I mean by this, that means that we placed all of our organic materials into the digesters on day 1, and they were allowed to digest over a 35-day period. So you can see here, this is a bird's eye view of our experiment. You can see how we used our 6 complete mix digesters here for our field trial. And so for this particular field trials, these digesters contained either manure only or a radish plus manure co-digestion mixture. And then during trial 1, we used a 27% radish mixture. And in trial 2, we used a 13% radish mixture. Now, I do want to point out that from our lab studies, although it was determined that increasing the amount of radish increased methane production, we decided to actually use a smaller amount of radish in our field studies because, one, a pre-existing dairy digester may not have the additional space to accommodate such large additions of radish. And secondly, we also wanted to minimize clogging the digester system with solids. As well, we wanted to avoid putting excess strain on our digester mixers. So if you look at the radish plus manure digester here, you can see that relative to its manure only digester, that you can see that the radish plus manure digesters initially experienced a lag in methane production relative to the manure only digester. So this particular lag could be due to the methane production being inhibited by the sulfur content of the radish, or say a longer acclimation period was required to digest the radish. And I do want to point out too that although our manure only digesters from trial 1 and trial 2 contain the same amount of manure, methane production was found to be significantly different between trials when we normalized the data. Therefore, we actually, the effect of forage radish organic loading on methane production, that could not be statistically determined. However, what I do want to point out is that just by adding a small quantity of radish, such as 13%, to a dairy digester, this resulted in a 40% increase in methane production when we co-digest it. And then looking at hydrogen sulfide, these are the 2 graphs that show the amounts of methane as well as hydrogen sulfide in the biogas. And so you can see that during the initial digestion period, there were elevated concentrations of H2S in the biogas. However, that H2S production rapidly declined as methane production increased, likely due to that rapid utilization of that sulfur substrate that occurred over those first 14 days. And we can also point out that during peak methane production, we had high concentrations of methane, greater than 67%, that was obtained in the biogas with radish co-digestion. All right, another question for you. Co-digestion is the process of breaking down two or more types of organic feedstock simultaneously in an anaerobic digester. True or false? All right, great. The answer is true. All right, so beyond just say beyond diversifying, revenue streams and co-digesting, livestock farms, they are considering other business models to make anaerobic digestion a viable technology for them. So I do kind of want to point out two additional business models for anaerobic digestion. So, one, instead of a farmer actually owning and operating the digester is owned and operated by a third party. So, how this works, the farmer actually leases their land to the third party for constructing and operating the digester. And the farmer, they'll pay a small amount towards the digester. And the farmer also provides the digester feedstock. So, with this particular model, this means that the farmer does not have to have the technical expertise to operate the digester, and it lessens the risk for the farmer as the third party is responsible for operating that digester. And another model that you may see for farms that are actually located within close proximity to each other, you could have, say, a centralized or a community digester model. And this is where farmers share the installation and operating cost of a digester, and their waste is transported off site from their farm to the centralized location. So I do want to point out to you that the biogas industry definitely has room for growth. The American Biogas Council reports that Illinois ranks ninth in the United States for its biogas production potential. And so, if we would have a full build out of the state's biogas industry, that includes, say, the digestion of manure, wastewater. That means that we could potentially power 900,000 households yearly. So, this would definitely significantly reduce Illinois' dependence on fossil fuels, and this would cut greenhouse gas emissions. So, if you are interested in exploring anaerobic digestion further, I would recommend checking out the US EPA AgStar or the American Biogas Council website. So, I have another poll question for you. How familiar are you with anaerobic digestion technology after our lesson? All right, great. And I have one additional question for you. After today's webinar, my knowledge of anaerobic digestion technology has increased. All right. So I do thank you for engaging with me and attending today's webinar. And we do have some time to answer questions. Holly, would you like to help with that, or if anyone has any questions?
Sure would. So what we'll do is, if you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask the question, and Ashley will try and answer it here. If it's something that she needs to do a little more research on or ask someone else, we'll get that question and we'll shoot it out to everyone so that you'll be able to have the answer. And maybe you're like, oh, that was a great question. And then everybody will know that answer. So if you have any, go ahead and open up your mic or type it in, and I'll keep an eye on the chat box. Oh, we have one here. How much water would a digester use? It looks water intensive.
So remember, we are using a waste product. So this is a waste material. So it just depends on the volume of waste that you're digesting would be how much water actually goes into the digester. We aren't using additional water for the digester for the most part. This is waste materials.
Ashley, could you talk a little bit more about the homeowner waste? Would that be like, would the municipalities rent some kind of digesting compost machine, and you would take your waste to one location? Talk a little bit about that.
So usually when you see these household digesters, these are more so in developing countries where they would take their waste materials, like from their cows, their pigs, and their food scraps, and place it into the digester to produce. It would produce just enough gas to produce to make enough gas for 1 or 2 meals. But in the U.S., it's probably unlikely that you're going to see a household anaerobic digester, but you do have businesses. And those businesses may be like a food waste business, or they may have residues. They may have materials from like a food processing plant. They may take their materials to a centralized facility, a centralized anaerobic digester, and they will use those feedstocks from that food processing plant or from food that was diverted from the landfill and place it in the anaerobic digester in that centralized location.
Okay, so like maybe we would have one that would be in the county seat, county capital, and we would just bring, or would you put it out at the street and they pick it up in a truck? Do you have any idea how they do that in other states that already are working on this?
Yeah, so usually I have not seen where they're picking up from the household level scraps for like food waste for a centralized anaerobic digester. This has been more so at the business level where they are picking up the scraps from the food processing plants to take it to a centralized digester. So like at the University of Illinois, they actually take their food scrap materials, some of their food scraps, to the Urbana and Champaign sanitary district that's used as a feedstock for their anaerobic digester.